I'm Sharon Spangler, and welcome to this Council Connection. My guest today is Dave Aiazzi. Welcome to our program.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Lots going on with this legislative session. I think everybody has a watchful eye on it because there's a lot that could affect the City of Reno's budget. And one of the bills that the city is sponsoring is SB 78, and it affects the NRS that provides for collective bargaining. Dave, I have a feeling that you had something to do with this bill because parts of the bill pertain to making negotiations with the unions public. Why do you feel that's so important?
Well, actually, I don't want to make them public, but I want some of the results to be public. I don't think you could ever get anywhere having negotiations in front of a TV camera. But when one side presents an offer to the other side, I think that should be a public document so that everyone knows what the other side is saying. I mean, this past weekend or a while ago, that was a perfect example of when members of a union said, we were very close this last weekend, the city called off the contract talks. Now, I wasn't involved in the talks, so I have no idea what they're talking about. Our management team says they don't know what they're talking about. It may be true, it may be false, but we'll never know because there's nothing that says they have to actually present to the public what they were offering or what the city was offering. I think it needs to go both ways.
So, as far as you're concerned, it would be an asset to the public and the taxpayer to know what kinds of negotiations are out there.
Right. I don't think a lot of people know that maybe 10 people sit in a room and they do the negotiating, and it's not the city council, and it's not the membership of the union. They elect people to go in there, and we have our management team that goes in there. The city manager decides who that is, and what they choose to tell us out of that is totally up to them. There's nothing that they really have to explain to us about what is going on in that negotiating process. The other reason I wanted to put it forward, I thought Governor Gibbons was absolutely incorrect because he wanted to make them fully public. And so before he brought out something that I thought would never have a shot to get through, because I don't think that's correct, this was sort of an intermediate bill to say, let's make parts of it public, make some parts of it change, because I think some parts do need to be changed.
Especially considering what we've gone through just in this last month and a half since we are going to make budget cuts. You see the firefighters come to the podium and they make a recommendation that they'll take back to their group and vote on it after you've discussed it at the podium and in the meeting, and then you make recommendations that you think that they should take back to their group. And really no one, apart from the people that are talking to their groups or talking in the big meeting, really know what's being done.
Right. I mean, in the past years that I've been involved in these things, you'll go talk to city employees, you'll see them on the street, and they'll say, how come you guys didn't sign that agreement? So, well, that didn't come to us. And how come you guys didn't offer us this? Well, we did offer you that. So it's very hard to even tell the people in the unions what's being said one way or another. And I think it puts an arbitrary, makes it contentious. I don't think it has to be a contentious negotiations. But if you can do it in secret, it means it can be contentious because you have some people who want to negotiate some things without telling other people why they're negotiating that. So I can't question why the city manager's going on one particular point because I don't need to know if they're going on that particular point.
Right, and during these tough economic times, we need to have excellent relationships with all of our unions.
Absolutely. Another thing I think that could be changed is right now, we don't have a contract with the fire union. As our only example right now, last June 30th of 2010, that contract expired. So now we're going through a long, laborious process of getting that contract done, which involves going to, first you have to negotiate, and then you go to what's called fact-finding. We're still not done with fact-finding right now. What's this, 9 months after the contract is over? Then after fact-finding, then you go to arbitration, which could be another year. So during that time, that contract continues on, but it could be 2 years after the contract is over that then you say, well, now we finally settled that contract, and there's other contracts that will be out there. And the whole time, all these laws, both sides say we can't discuss it because we're in negotiations. So they bind the hands of us who are elected to tell the public what's going on, to say you can't talk about that because that's part of the labor negotiations.
We've been talking about SB 78, which was a bill that was introduced on behalf of the City of Reno, and it has quite a few provisions that would really change the way things are done.
But I want to make it clear that this isn't a union busting proposal like they're doing in Wisconsin. It's just to make it more public. I think that collective bargaining is very important. I believe in unions to protect the employees and the people who work for larger governments, that there are certainly people and governments that can override what happens there. I think that's what's going on in Wisconsin. I'm certainly not for that at all, to strip away the bargaining rights. I think we just need to refine them, and now's the time that we have to look at refining some of the bargaining rights and make it more fair to both sides.
Another section says that if the legislature makes changes to a law that involve money, that agreements with the different labor groups would have to be immediately open to take a look at, so that changes could be made to offset or balance out some of the changes that were made in other laws.
Right. In the union contracts that I've looked at, they all say that all the bargaining has to be done between the union and the city. But then some will go to the legislature and get added provisions built into their contracts to say, now this is a law that local governments have to abide by, which increases our cost tremendously, that they didn't have to bargain for in good faith. And I think that that is something that if you're going to get a benefit on the other end, you should have to come back and bargain for that fine. The legislature says you should have to provide this to your employees, but it doesn't say it should be at no cost. There's got to be some leeway about how that gets paid for. But right now it's just said this is what you have to do. And I believe it should be negotiated with the local jurisdiction now to say, how are we going to pay for that added benefit that you just went around collective bargaining to get? So on one hand, everyone wants collective bargaining, but when we can go around it, we will. I don't think that's right either.
It's a fairness issue.
It absolutely is a fairness issue. Any more than I don't think I can go to the legislature and change a benefit. I mean, I wouldn't go there to take something out. I'm trying to change collective bargaining for things progressive, the things that happen in the future, not things that happened in the past. But usually those things that they get through the legislature is things that from now on they apply to everyone, no matter how long you've been here.
Which I can understand why this was added to this proposed bill. Says that if there's a gap in the budget, that the government organizations can suspend salary increases and benefit increases, but they would be subject to future negotiations.
Yeah, we certainly saw how that could happen right now. The other thing that happens in the city or in negotiations is depending on which one gets the arbiter first, maybe there's a couple $1 million left over in our rainy day fund. The arbiter says, well, you have money, city, you've got to pay them a raise or an increase. But then the next bargaining unit doesn't get that because the first one got it. So it's more of a matter of timing than fairness. So if we had some of those provisions in there, we could talk to all the unions at once and say, look, here's the situation that we're in right now. Let's all agree to start doing the same things. But that's not the way it works right now. It favors one union over another just on the basis of timing.
Just to get into a little bit more detail on this, it says that if the ending fund balance for general or special revenue funds which receive revenue from property taxes or the local government tax distribution account is less than 8.3% of the total budgeted expenditures, that's when that would go into effect, that the city could say, we don't have the money to pay you.
Absolutely, and I think that would have to be done also hand in hand with our bargaining units. They would have to be involved in the budget to say whether they agree with that or not just something that the city says that's the position we're in right now. Because I get that every year is we don't believe your numbers. Well, we try to get audited every year. I welcome the unions to come in and hire their own auditors to come through our books and talk to us at the public forum about when we take money out of our reserve fund to pay something else. They have the right, like everyone else, to come and say this is how it's going to affect us. So I think it should be, again, a transparent sort of an issue where we wouldn't just dictate what those terms are, but the bargaining units would also have a big say-so in when we met that provision.
We've been talking about the proposed SB 78, and really the crust of it is that there needs to be a change in the way the negotiations are done according to this proposed legislation, and that they ought to be more open to the public.
I agree, but it's not going to see the light of day.
You're not very optimistic.
I've been through this a couple times.
Is there anything that can be done to make changes, or are we totally tied to what the legislature does with the NRS 288 provides for collective
We're
bargaining?
absolutely tied to what the legislature does on everything. It's been ruled time and time again that the cities and counties are creatures of the state, which means they can dictate exactly what we do or don't do, or what we provide or what we'd have to provide. It's frustrating to me as a local elected official that they pass rules that affect us, but they don't affect state workers. For instance, 288, all these provisions I'm talking about, they don't affect state workers. So when the governor just comes out and says, I'm reducing everyone's salary and everyone has to take furloughs, that works to help the state on their budget, but we can't do that locally. We cannot unilaterally make any of those changes that the state can do. So it's very frustrating when they pass bills that apply to us but doesn't also apply to them.
It seems like there's some frustration with the unions. There's another bill, SB 41, which provides that the City of Reno wouldn't even have to be involved in collective bargaining.
Yeah, there's always going to be some people that do that. I don't agree with that. I think that everyone should be represented and be able to talk with one voice to say, here's how we want to be treated. I think that's only a fair way to go. I find it interesting to me that the people who think that you should be against unions form their own unions. I mean, the Tea Party is a union. The Chamber of Commerce is a union, people getting together to fight something, but they don't like other unions. So I always dispel that notion that they don't like unions because they are a union. The Chamber of Commerce is a perfect example. There's a group of businesses who get together and say, we would have a bigger voice if we all joined together and speak as one. And they think that that's very good and American. And I agree with that statement. But I think workers have that same right too, that we should have a decision on how we get treated in our workplace.
On that note, what are you hoping all the workers at the city are going to do before the next round of budgeting?
Well, I would hope, and I had this hope in 2009 and 2008, that they would look at the city as a whole, that the city has treated them very nicely, very well in the past 10 years, 15 years, and they look at other people in other unions about what we have to do to keep this city functioning the way the public who pays them wants it to be functioning, and we all get together and say, maybe we should all take the same cuts. Instead of the unions are pitting themselves against each other, and that's not a very good way to do things. And I don't like that. I wish that they would all come together. I wish they would sit in a room and say, here's what we think we can do, and the unions as a union would come forward to the city council and say, here's what we think we can do. But they don't choose to do that. They go separately and say, well, this is what we will do, and this is what we will do, knowing that if I give you more, I've got to take it away from a different union. I only have so much money. If I don't lay off people in your group, the layoffs go to someone else. I think I said this in December of '09. If everyone would stop taking raises in 2009, we could get through this. And I think that we could have. We could have gotten through this with very, very minimal layoffs if we would have just stopped providing raises. And there are people still getting raises in the city. Maybe not cost of living raises, but we do have longevity pay and some step increases that still happen. And those are the kind of things that probably we should have stopped a couple of years ago. But we can't do that as a council alone. We asked the unions to do that, and they all told us pretty much no. The fire union did give up a cost of living raise, and I absolutely thank them for that. The RPPA, the police, sort of did the same thing. They extended their contract for a year with no raise, so they weren't guaranteed a raise, but they said we'll go another year without a raise. But we still have the step increases and those kind of issues that happened.
And the number that's going around now is a 7.5% cut for across the board for all city employees.
If we can do that, and I honestly I don't know from the city manager yet, is that a 7.5% cut in their income or a 7.5% cut to the city's costs? Because in that, rolled into that, you have to add PERS. So if I ask, for instance, a city employee to take a 7.5% cut in their payroll, if it's a police or fire officer, I get to add 40% onto that because I wouldn't have to pay PERS on top of that, the retirement system. So that is almost a 10% cut in cost to the city of Reno,
Right.
as opposed to 7.5%. If it's just overall 7.5% cut, what we're really asking the employees to do is maybe take a 5% cut in salary.
Right.
So it all depends on how it's worded, and I think those are the kind of things that aren't getting out there to the public, and they watch all these acronyms and say, what are they talking about? Can't they even get it straight on this? But for instance, when some of the bargaining youth gave up their uniform allowance and their dry cleaning, and those are not non-PERS compensable. So they gave those up, but we didn't get an added bonus of not having to pay the PERS at the end of the day.
Well, a lot of people that thought they wanted to be politicians are probably happy they're not sitting in your seat or the rest of the council right now, because you've got a lot of tough work ahead of you.
Well, it's tough, but it's something, you know, if we're here for the good times and we're here for the bad times, just like the employees that we're dealing with have been here the whole time I've been here for the most part. I understand the county is asking across the board for an 8.2% cut in their unions, and they've been a lot more successful in getting things from their unions than the city of Reno has. I'm not sure why that is. I wish that, again, I wish the unions here would all get together and say, this is what we're all going to do as a group.
Thank you for your insight, and thank you for talking about this SB 78.
You bet.
And thank you all.